Anyone would tell you that music is a business, and every business needs to invest in themselves and their leaders. In today's interview, I'm talking with my guest about the intersection of the music industry and those business principles, and about a few leadership and communication ideas and exercises that may be helpful for those with musical talent, and yes, those without. I'm your host, Jordyne Carmack, a leadership development and communication skills speaker and trainer headquartered in London, Kentucky. And you're listening to Women of the Bluegrass, a leadership development podcast for and about women leading the way in Kentucky industries. My guest today is Renee Collins Cobb, radio host and human resources development consultant, originally from Catlettsburg, Kentucky. She has dedicated her life to giving local musicians a voice and giving women in music a platform to tell their story. This includes documentary-style films, the radio program Overtones Live, Listen Locally, and more. This year, she and her husband have won a Josie Music Award, 2 Lexington Music Awards, Appy Awards, and most recently, she represented Kentucky and Los Angeles in the Next Star Remarkable Women competition for the 2023 Woman of the Year. In addition to her role in the local Kentucky music scene, Renee Collins Cobb has more than 30 years of experience in the organizational effectiveness, diversity, inclusion, and human resource development fields. She serves as an executive coach, organizational consultant, facilitator, presenter, career development guru, and team development coach. Oh, you might have noticed we didn't have an episode last week. Sorry about that. Lots of on-the-road travel as spring really hits its stride over here. We've got more great episodes in the works, but I'll give you a heads up. Women of the Bluegrass is expanding into Central and Western Kentucky. We've focused primarily on Eastern Kentucky stories to this point, but we're excited to broaden the women we interview and really provide stories from women across the Bluegrass state. There are so many more Eastern Kentucky stories to tell and so much more to learn, but I want this to be a resource for all the women in our state, and that's the reason for the upcoming changes. Thanks, as always, for standing with us and supporting this work by listening, sharing, and recommending women to be on the show. You're a joy, and I'm grateful for you. Now, happy listening for today's episode. You're listening to Women of the Bluegrass, and man, I am so excited to introduce to you my new friend, Renee Collins Cobb. Renee, thank you for being on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
Now, listen, I was putting together your bio, and goodness gracious, you have done a little bit of everything, but I just love getting the opportunity to know you a little bit more and share so much more about you and about the initiatives that you're working on with our listening audience. And so knowing these things, I want to just start because we know with authentic leadership, so much of that begins with these formative stories. And so I want to just take a few minutes and talk about some of those formative moments in your life that led you to becoming this powerhouse leader that you are today. So tell me, where are you from?
I am from Catlettsburg, Kentucky originally, and we live now in Lexington, Kentucky.
All right, Catlettsburg. So place that for somebody who might be from a different part of Appalachia.
So Catlettsburg is close to Ashland, Kentucky, and sits on the Country Music Highway 23. And we enjoyed growing up there, but it's in a tri-state area, actually, where Ohio is kind of across one bridge and Huntington, West Virginia is across another. So not only did I get to grow up like in Eastern Kentucky, but we had those Ohio and West Virginia options,
yes.
To go see and to tap into, some of the culture that was across the rivers as well.
Oh, amazing. So Catlettsburg, I actually drove through there for the first time. Now, you and I met at the Appalachian Arts and Entertainment Awards.
Yes.
And so if you've caught that episode from several weeks ago now, you were one of the people that was awarded many, many times. Did you ever dream as a little girl growing up that you would be on stage accepting awards?
Well, I dreamed of it. Let's just say that.
I like it.
I will also say that this has just been an exceptional year that I'll probably never, ever experience again, but I'm okay with it. And this is why it's so funny that just even last week I made a post about, Shakespeare's comment about all the world's at stage and we are merely its players.
Yes.
So in the last 6 months, we have been on the Opry stage accepting the Josie Music Award. We've been on the Lexington Music Awards stage, the Lyric Theater, accepting one of those awards. And we've also been on the Appalachian Arts and Entertainment stage at the Mountain Arts Center accepting that award. And I just got back from a trip from Hollywood where I accepted another award, but we'll talk about that a little bit further into the program.
It's a banner year for you guys. It is a
banner year.
But we always know that those 1 years, everybody thinks, oh man, it seems like they're just winning left and right, but they don't see the grind of the years before to get to that point.
And I will also mention, if I can, I really likened it to, because you're in leadership development as well, but the story about the Chinese bamboo tree and how when one of those trees is planted, it literally, nothing happens. It's all happening underground. So nothing happens until the 5th year. And in the 5th year, it grows to be 80 feet tall. So I really liken this because we are in our 5th year of virtually everything that we are experiencing success in now, but also as a really good tenant to provide for people that it may seem like you're not doing anything and it may feel like that, but it takes time and it takes the roots. I said, you can't have the fruit without the roots.
That's right.
So we've been roots, building and growing over the last 5 years. So while it doesn't surprise me, it's still so nice to be recognized for a lot of hard work over the last 5 years.
Yes, and all of the people who've supported that work along the way. So maybe as a little girl, you were dreaming about some of these things and about these moments. Was there a formative event in your childhood or in your teenage years that you would say set you on this path?
Yes. And I might say that my mother and father nourished a love for film and music with me growing up. My grandfather was a member of the Old Dominion Barn Dance, which was a radio show in the 30s, 40s, 50s, where I got to grow up seeing him perform on stage. And he performed with the likes of Mother Maybelle Carter, the Carter family.
Wow.
Grandpa Jones. Some of these
giants.
Ramona Jones, yes, giants. And my father, took us to see him often. That's out of Richmond, Kentucky. It was at the Richmond, Virginia. Excuse me, getting my Richmonds mixed up. Richmond, Virginia, and we had opportunities, to go up there and see him. And I was like 9 years old, and not really, realizing what was going on. But as my time has passed and I've become an adult, my dad has made it his role to really do the genealogy behind our family and has really researched everything there is on our musical family. We joke because we all have a book. It's my brother has a book and I have a book and my grandfather has a book and we have a book. And he's done such a marvelous job of really connecting our past into our future and really what it means to us. When I was in Hollywood 2 weeks ago for Remarkable Woman, my mom said to me, she said, when you were 6, you were always wanting to see that Hollywood sign. And I will just say, at 60, to see that, to know that at 6, and then to come back and see that at 60 for the first time, it was just really a life-changing moment for me. It's something is, people would say silly is just seeing a sign up on a hill, but to be able to, and it was outside of my hotel room. So it was like right there the whole time. So there's a lot of symbolism.
Full circle moment for you and seeing some of those childhood dreams come true. So you had these values instilled in you, a love of music and of the arts in general. What other core values did you really learn from your family in those formative years?
Well, my dad was an executive with Ashland Wool as well. So one of the interesting things that I have really been able to reflect on the trajectory of my own life is that the first 25 years of my life really reflected the music part of me and the art part of me. I worked so hard in practicing my piano, and there was 2 reasons for that. I really wanted to go to the University of Kentucky School of Music, and I worked as hard as I could, and I got a full scholarship there. But the other thing, and I just noted this yesterday, I wanted to meet Barry Manilow someday. And when I saw Barry Manilow play the piano, and you're thinking here like young teenager, right? Young teenage years, and you're seeing that, and I'm like, he's sitting on a bar stool playing his piano. I'm going to go get my bar stool, and I'm going to play on my piano too. And I never did get to meet him, but here's the interesting dynamic from it is that I think it's what we learn in the process of really starting to pursue our goals that really teach us a lot. And that led to like the full music scholarship. studying music for about 25 years of my life, I also had this father who worked so incredibly hard in the corporate world. And it interested me. You know, it was so interesting to have, like, he had love for music, had love for business. So the next 25 years of my life were spent on going to get my master's at Xavier University with an MBA. And really taking a lot of the concepts of hard work, practicing, determination, dedication into what I could do with the business world. And I found a lot of parallels between what we do in music and what we do in leadership and what we do in all of the values and strategic objectives of an organization. So that was the next 25 years of my life.
Wow. Listen, I just think it's important to pause right there and say, if you're not investing in the music education of your children, whatever their giftedness is, you're missing an opportunity. Even if they don't become a concert pianist, they're still learning things that will be so applicable both in the corporate sector or whatever sector they decide to pursue, because there are those commonalities. And so investing in our music programs, I will champion this forever. Investing in our music programs is an investment in our communities as a whole, not just in the arts in our communities. It's so much more than that.
I think there's a huge role that parents play in that. And recently, one of my best friend's father passed away, and I got up to speak at the funeral, and I just really felt led to really thank her father and her mother for nourishing this love of music in both her and her brother's life. And they have two different types of music. She's a blues singer and he's a rap singer. And it doesn't matter what it is. It's just the concept of nourishing that love of music, because music cuts across so many other disciplines. We've done a lot of research, even with the students that we went to school with at the UK School of Music, and they're not all doing music things, but they've taken all those concepts that we've learned during the year, and they're pastors, they're ministers, they're lawyers. We had 3 Miss Kentuckys that were from the UK School of Music while I was there. They're just all different types of professions. They're recording artists, and it's legal.
And everything else.
Everything else. And it's just wonderful to experience that. What I found from age 50 to 60 was a total immersion and integration into the two disciplines of music and business. And that's what's got me to where I am now. And that really aligned with reconnecting with my husband during that time as well. And he was my champion. I call him my chief encouragement officer. So he's my CEO.
I love it. Well, that's the best definition of a CEO that I've ever heard.
Yes.
Wow. So this alignment between music and business, what specific, you mentioned a few a second ago, but I don't want to rush past this. Were there a couple of values or similar disciplines that you note between these two fields? And what are those?
I think it's presentation. I think it's promotion. I also think it's production. And I think it's preservation. And I say preservation in the way that what we're doing right now is trying to preserve moments, specifically like through film, that are from our past and from our present, but will be enjoyed for future generations to come. And that involves getting very multicultural, getting multi-generational, and getting very multi-genre. So those are the 3 major things. I find a lot of value, and I tell people, I said, make sure you have friends that are of all ages. Do not hang around with just your generation. I have some friends that are in their teens, and I have a 96-year-old friend who's our former professor. And we have everything all between, because I think each generation that at least I've experienced, and the ones that have come before me, have a set of values, ethics, work ethic, definitely, that can be transformed and utilized in other generations.
I think there is a tendency in a variety of organizations to sort of write off another generation for cultural reasons or stereotypes. And we're transitioning just a little bit into some of the leadership development work that you've done, if that's okay. What are some of the risks that you see whenever there are those generational stereotypes involved? And I'm not going to target one particular, I'm not going to blame one particular group. Everybody does it.
I don't
but
think it's
what
necessary.
Are some of the risks
Some
that
of the
you've
risks.
noticed? And then we'll go into how we address those.
Well, one of the things that I really specialize in is the teaching of unconscious bias. And one of the things that I tell people to explain that, because when people hear that word bias, it automatically has this negative reaction. Mm-hmm. I've asked people, what are your associations with bias? And it's all negative things, judgment, stereotype, unfair. And then I'll say, what are your associations with the word intuition? And then it gets very gut feeling and sixth sense. And it's all of these just sexy, adventurous words. And really explaining to them that bias and intuition is the same thing. And our reaction to that word comes from the word itself. So this is a word that just we all have a bias towards the word bias. But what I explain in unconscious bias that I think really ties into leadership development is that we are all biased, and we have bias because we have brains, and our brains are constantly taking in data and trying to make sense of that data. And what we can see with our eyes is not the complete story. What happens is we fill in the blanks and we make up a story. And sometimes that story provides advantage for one and disadvantage for another. And this happens on a very unconscious level. The reason we need to pay attention to that as it relates to risks with generations, for example, is we have these labels that come out. I've had an experience the last 3 weeks. I've had 3 people introduce me and say, my name's Karen, but I'm a nice Karen. And it really made me wonder about how tragic it is that now we have something about a name, and because somebody has started this label, that somebody has to introduce themselves that way. Think about the okay boomer thing, and think about the snowflake thing, right? So
the word dinosaur.
Yeah, dinosaur. And there's also assumptions made that older people do not understand technology, for example. But there's also assumptions that younger people do. And I've had some younger people say, listen, I'm the least technological person in this room. I'm 25 years old, And I mean, people say, what's the big deal about this? Well, this is the big deal about this, because it shapes the way that we see the world. And we do not see the world as it is. We see the world as we are.
Wow. That's an amazing summary. I don't think I've ever heard it presented that way, with bias being literally it's these mental shortcuts that we have, and having this the same as intuition. And so we would want to lean into our intuition, but we reject bias. But if those two things are the same and they're mental shortcuts that can sometimes hurt and sometimes help, we have to first be aware of those things, and then we need to sometimes learn to overcome those things. So do you have any strategies or recommendations as to how one can identify and overcome this unconscious bias?
Well, we have 2 reactions. We have what's called the fast brain and the slow brain. This is Daniel Kahneman research. We tend to call it, because I don't like the word slow and I don't like the word fast. Right. But I tend to call it the automatic brain and the deliberate brain. So the automatic brain also, by the way, keeps us safe. So not all bias is bad.
Like a hot stove.
Exactly. Or if someone's coming at us with a knife, we're not going to hang around and say, gee, I wonder what they're going to do with that knife.
Should I move, or should I go this?
Exactly.
We don't have enough time to process that intentionally. So the automatic brain kicks in and says, oop, that's hot. I'm going to withdraw. Right. So not always a bad thing.
Or there's red lights in front of me, so I need to put on my brakes. But we also have the deliberate brain. So my strategy really goes into tapping into the deliberate brain and knowing, where do you most fast react? Where do you most automatically react? And stopping yourself for even 1 to 2 seconds before you respond. I read an interview with a umpire from the Major League who said, he does this in this way. He's just like, typically when the ball hits the glove, the umpire says strike or says ball. And he says, in his mind, silently, he says, it's a. And then he goes, strike. It's a ball. And that gives him time to basically process and react. This isn't like sitting around waiting 2 minutes before you decide. However, there are moments that might be. But think about when you get an email and it doesn't land well with you. And, the most typical reaction is, I wonder what they meant by that. And so if we're using our automatic brain, we might just start typing, and it's just like, I'm going to fire away and I'm going to, send that. And then more tragically, we sometimes hit the reply to all button, when we're not doing that. But taking the time to say, okay, I'm going to read this email and I'm going to read it out loud next. And if it doesn't still sound well to me, I may even take it to someone else that can say, you know what, well, that's not the way that I read this at all, before I do that firing off of the send button. And I will tell you, I have absolutely, in the year 2021, I believe, I've made it a goal just to start pausing more and just putting it in my everyday language. Here's the situation. It's not the thought that's incorrect. We all have thoughts that come into our minds when we react, right? We have this response like, I don't like it or I like it. So you can positively bias too. Mm-hmm. But it's not the thought that's incorrect, but if a decision is made off of the thought that, again, provides advantage for one, disadvantage for other, that's where we need to stop and pause.
And there are so many implications for this from, yes, the one I think we might be more familiar with, like hiring and firing, mm-hmm. right? But then also in our day-to-day interactions with someone, because if we think a person is going to behave in a specific way, sometimes we look for those behaviors.
Yes.
And that's not always a good thing because we sort of prevent them from behaving in any other way. Exactly. We don't give them space to grow or behave differently over time. And because we're already pre-responding to what we think they'll do.
Exactly.
And that has implications for our personal relationships, our professional relationships. Do you have any specific case studies or examples that could sort of summarize this whole idea for us, or things that you've encountered in the organizations you've worked with?
Mm-hmm.
Would you share one with us?
Well, like I said, I tend to look at things on a very simple level. People think that this is complex stuff, but you think about pausing. That doesn't take anything but just taking a big mental deep breath. Mm-hmm. Because again, we have reactions to what lands on the brain as being I like it or I don't like it.
Right.
Yes or no. So that's one simple step. Some other examples that I've really shared is this thing with eye contact. All right. So let's just kind of unpack that. I've been brought up, and because we've all been brought up with what our book of rules, and this is the way you should do things, right? Well, the thing is that works real well if you're growing up and maybe you're part of the country or you're part of Kentucky. But when you go and you say, I'm taking my values with me, I'm supposed to look you directly in the eye when I talk to you, because that indicates to me is that you're paying attention, right? You're engaged. Right. And if people aren't looking you in the eye, there's all kinds of things that go around that too. They're being dishonest, So we put all of this assignment on people that don't make direct eye contact. So think about it in an interview situation. And you're saying, okay, someone's in here and I'm interviewing them. They're not looking me directly in the eye. I don't think they're going to be a good candidate. And we may rush through the rest of that interview. Now, however, think about the fact that this person on the other side of the table may be culturally different than we are, and they assign direct eye contact as being aggressive and hostile, and they're sitting there going, that person's looking me directly in the eye, and I don't think I want to work here.
Right. People
say, what's the big deal? I think about even the handshake. Now, think about this pre-COVID, of course, but, that's a pretty, general custom that we have here with greeting. So we say, okay, what makes a handshake a good handshake? Do you know?
I would probably say pressure and strength. I always
Firm,
think about
right?
I don't want a dead fish handshake. If it feels like I'm holding a dead fish, that's it ooks me. I think about things like sweat. I don't want a sweaty handshake.
What about the one that's so hard that it hurts?
Oh,
right?
Too much pressure. Yeah,
so,
too much firmness.
Point being is that we assign a story to something as simple as a greeting, right? And we will not remember that firm handshake because it aligns with our values of what it should be. Right. But we do remember the dead fish handshake, and we remember the handshake that was so hard that it hurt. Sometimes the rest of our lives. Right. So it's just honestly, the strategy is just to know and to prime yourself, right? I know what I react to when I look at a resume, for example. People start to do age math,
Right.
I mean, it's just, or they look at a name and then they have some kind of assignment with a name or where they live in the country or where they went to school.
Oh, yeah, that's absolutely true. State school versus private school. Yes. Which one? Sure. All of these. And it's like we initially said, it's not that these mental shortcuts are always bad. It's that sometimes they can cause us to perceive something inaccurately or to respond inaccurately. And so that's why it's important for us to first be aware and then to take that moment and press pause. Wow, this is so solid leadership development advice for any stage really of a person's career. And now you've done this leadership development for businesses, and now you're working a lot with musicians. Do you get to tie these things together as you work with musicians?
Well, I try really hard, and I'm not giving up on this, because the things that I've found, I've even made a mission statement workshop for musicians, because I don't experience anyway a lot of musicians or bands that have really sat down the process of going through a mission statement and also goals, and how are we going to treat each other while we are in this experience of having a band. And I really think the absence of this can be very prohibitive to their success. We all, just like bands, are just like families. You know, they go through these phases, and then sometimes somebody quits, and then they come back, and right. And I honestly, I shouldn't say I hate, because I don't like to use that word, but I have an aversion to the word family when it comes to corporate work, and also with with musicians, because, you know, families don't lay people off, right? I mean, it may be in some form or fashion, but there's not a layoff, and there's not a, you know, okay, I'm going to sit you down for your annual evaluation, and we're going to talk about.
I don't know that I've recently done that with any family member.
Exactly. So. But in the same sense, I think musicians need to think more strategically like businesses, because it is so important to know that, you know, you have the forming, storming, norming, you know, performing, right? So a lot of bands that I've experienced try to rush through this storming phase because it's uncomfortable. And I really think a strategy is to sit in that space for a little bit longer than what you're comfortable with, because you rush through that and you get to performing, and all of a sudden conflict breaks out, and then it's like we either go back to the storming phase or we say, I quit. So I really think that's another strategy, is to get comfortable with being very uncomfortable, and also to explore awkwardness and discomfort. And that sounds funny, because I said, how many of you all wake up and say, I'm going to explore some awkwardness and discomfort today? But honestly, that's where we stretch ourselves. And we're also, I mean, like I said, the way I brought up, you know, we want our children to be comfortable. We want them to be happy, but it's so important to work through these times, because it's the part of the process where we grow. If everything comes easy and we get along, like I said, storming breaks out, and it goes to I quit instead of working through it. Does that make sense?
No, it makes perfect sense. I mean, if we look at bands and the development of musicians as you are a team as well, working toward a common goal, which we hope is to make great music and be successful doing it, or something along those lines. You want to make sure you're intentionally in developing as a team. That way, whenever it could be little things like one person's super getting on the nerves of somebody else, like, or one person constantly forgets their equipment, or some of these little things can blow up if you don't have the strategies within your team to address those. And some of these, I think, are rhythms too, of goal setting, of delivering great feedback to one another, helpful, kind feedback, not the compliment sandwich where you don't really keep up with what was actually said in the middle. Having these kind of rhythms, just like an organization or a business would, having that within the context of your band is amazing. I love that. So I can't even believe that I'm saying this almost to the end of our time together. I want to just pick your brain in so many different ways. But I love that you're bringing these leadership principles to the music industry. I think that's so valuable. And then connecting it with, you mentioned earlier, and I wrote down some of these: production and preservation and promotion and presentation. You're doing all of these things. So what are some of these big projects in the pipeline coming off of your experiences and Remarkable Woman and these different awards? You guys have had this banner year. What is next for you and your team?
Excellent. Well, just to kind of just rewind a little bit, my husband and I are producers of Overtones Live, which is a podcast and a radio show that promotes the music of Kentucky. In a broadcast way. And we moved from the studio to a live performance setting, which has been very exciting for us. This has allowed us to present bands where we couldn't do that before in the studio because there's not much room. And the next phase of that is going to actually record our show and film our show in Nashville. But what we're doing is we're showcasing Kentucky artists that are working in Nashville as musicians. So that's one thing. And Listen Locally is the presenter of that as well, but it's also the name of my consulting business, and that's where we use the concepts of diversity, equity, inclusion, and apply, music and business across the same sphere. We also have Room 17 Productions, which is our nonprofit arm, and that's our filmmaking, documentary making arm. My husband and I are also involved in a recording label and management group called Dreamland Entertainment Group. And let's see, I was most recently, like you said, named Kentucky's Remarkable Woman by Next Star Media, which is the local affiliate in Lexington is Fox 56. So this was a big shock, but I discovered that one of my friends had nominated me for this. And this was for women that forge the path for other women. And since we do so much work with Overtones Live in really promoting women, and like you're promoting women of, the Bluegrass as well, that was recognized. And we're planning on continuing that work as well, because I connected with 111 other angels who are just as committed to a cause, that we are. And we're probably going to be doing something out of that as well in podcast form and trying to get all their stories.
Oh, I love it. Well, obviously that's going to be something that ticks all the boxes for me. So if someone wanted to learn more about what you were doing, where would you tell them to go in and check more out about these different organizations?
Well, we have overtoneslive.com. That's a really great place to stop. And you will find also all of the shows are archived on that station, radio-wise. We also have a blog where we've done a lot of our writing, and you will see a lot of the writing where I have combined the disciplines of music and business together. We also have room17productions.com, which is, again, our nonprofit 501c3, and you will see there some of the documentary work that we've been doing. And that's also leaning in a direction where we're talking about where is music shown up in all of these people's lives. And just really talking about their stories, their life stories and their careers. We have listenlocally.com as well. So that's a place for my consulting work and also the Overtones Live show. So those are the three main things, but I also want to invite everybody to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Overtones Live. I think you'll find a really rich and robust, I don't want to say curriculum, but a music, offering of a lot of the acts in Kentucky that have been making this music of Kentucky so special.
Wow, that sounds like a great place. I'm jotting down all of these notes thinking, okay, I'm going to check out this thing. Well, Renee, most definitely you were deserving of the Remarkable Woman Award. That is incredible. And thank you for what you're doing to preserve the longevity of Kentucky music and developing those young and established artists with your leadership development background. I've learned so much, and I'm so grateful that you were here today to share this with our listening audience.
Warren and I thank you very much as well, Jordan. Thank you so much for all that you do for the community.
Thank you. This conversation about unconscious bias struck a chord with me today. As an authentic leader, our self-awareness is key, so it matters that we recognize what decisions and perceptions we have about other people or issues that happen automatically, instead of with careful thought or consideration. Perhaps these are related to issues of gender or ageism, race or beauty, or perhaps we always give people an A, even if they've earned something else. That's called the halo effect. Or we never give out an A because it's impossible to earn. That's called the horns effect. I'll be honest, I used to think about this a lot as a professor. I didn't want to be subtly giving some students a leg up because of my own bias. That's why I started incorporating more detailed rubrics into my assignments, so students were more likely to be graded on the quality of the work and not, unintentionally of course, on my relationship with the student. I am all for efficiency and productivity. These shortcuts aren't a bad thing, but I never want decisions based on my intuition to ultimately favor or harm someone else in a way that's inaccurate or inappropriate. So what about you? Do you have your own internal rules of thumb that you use to make decisions? And who might they help or hurt along the way? This week, identify one of those mental shortcuts and brainstorm who it could unfairly help and who it might hurt in practice. There's a quick exercise in the show notes you can use to check your own self-awareness in one of these categories, if you wanted to check it out. Until next time, go make the world a brighter place, sunshine. Thanks for listening.